This perverted man discovered a female doctor would come to his family's restaurant to eat at the same time every day and stare at him with focused eyes. At first he didn't pay much attention, until one day when he tentatively returned a flirtatious glance. A flash of excitement actually appeared in her eyes, just as she was about to walk towards him. Unexpectedly, a police car suddenly stopped in front of the restaurant. It turned out, today was the day this scumbag would have his electronic ankle bracelet removed, because they weren't sure if he had truly reformed. The police kindly reminded the doctor to be more cautious. The doctor smiled and thanked them for the reminder, but the next moment, she crushed sleeping pills into fruit juice, then returned to the restaurant again. Seeing that the electronic shackle on the man's foot had indeed been removed, she deliberately left her umbrella on the table, then turned and left. The man guessed this was a signal she left for him, so he hurriedly followed her out, excitedly inviting her to a hotel in the city. The doctor readily agreed, but changed the meeting location to her home in the remote suburbs. Then after the man rode his bicycle out of town, she drove her car pretending to catch up. Seeing it was the goddess he had been dreaming of, he hurriedly got in the car. Looking at this scumbag's sleazy expression, she thoughtfully handed him that bottle of specially prepared drink.
So good.
Well, I made it just for you.
Before long, the man felt dizzy and lightheaded. Even so, he still forced himself to help the doctor carry the plastic sheeting into the house. At this point, he was already sweating profusely. The doctor thoughtfully helped him remove his clothes and took a towel to wipe his sweat, took a deep breath with an expression of enjoyment, then fell into a drowsy stupor. When he woke up again, he found himself lying on the plastic sheeting he had personally dragged in. His mouth was gagged. His body was also tied up. Only then did the man realize this pervert had actually fallen into the hands of another pervert.
It's okay. It's okay.
Anyone she found distasteful, she would absolutely never let them live to see tomorrow's sun. The doctor originally couldn't be bothered with this scumbag, but his sister's cooking skills were truly exceptional, so she often went to this restaurant to eat. Only since the man was released from prison, his sister began showing injuries all over her body, but every time the police questioned her, she would only lie and say she had fallen.
Did you get a good look at her face? We should go ahead and call the police.
What will calling them even do? She'll just tell them she fell again. Just ignore it.
The sister's response left the police helpless. The doctor originally didn't want to meddle in other people's business, until one day, she saw a transfer notice posted at the restaurant entrance.
I don't deserve this. I mean, it's my restaurant!
Stop it already. It's not yours.
I'm gonna murder this guy.
Although under her assistant's persuasion, the doctor promised not to go overboard. But in her twisted perception, the restaurant where she ate daily had already become her own home. She would never allow it to be destroyed by anyone, since the scumbag was forcing his sister to sell the restaurant. Then she could only make him disappear from this world. Then she pulled out a knife. With a swift motion, she slit the man's throat, watching him die slowly in agony. Only then did the doctor's face show a happy smile. She not only enjoyed the sense of achievement from saving people in surgery, she also enjoyed this thrill of killing. Then she stuffed the body into the trunk and called her assistant.
You said you weren't gonna kill him. You'd make peace with it.
I need you to head over there and clean.
The assistant, who was studying for exams, still agreed to this thankless job in the end. He skillfully pulled out his specialized tools. After burning all of the man's clothes and identification, he then used professional chemicals to clean the blood traces in the house. Meanwhile, the doctor hummed a little tune while digging a pit on the hillside. The sound of the shovel hitting the dirt mixed with the pleasant music created an indescribable harmony, yet eeriness. However, just as the assistant was working hard, the burning clothes outside actually attracted police attention. He stopped his car and slowly looked towards the house. At the same time, the doctor had just finished digging the pit. A beam of light appeared in the distance. Then a figure slowly walked towards this direction. She knew things had been exposed, so she immediately hid behind the car, grabbing the shovel, ready to attack at any moment. Soon the person discovered the body on the ground. This man who appeared in the middle of the night wasn't a random passerby, but Professor Choi, the doctor's former mentor. The fact that he had become like this was all thanks to this man. The doctor's name was Jung Seok. She had been extremely interested in the human brain since childhood, even to the point of obsession. She had no parents, no source of income. She would rather borrow from loan sharks than support her own education, because she had a huge dream in her heart. She hoped that one day, she could study beside Professor Choi, Korea's top brain specialist. Through her relentless efforts, she finally met Professor Choi with the top grades in her school. Upon meeting, she couldn't wait to share all her insights with him. At the same time, she begged Professor Choi to pass all his knowledge to her, because she had bet her entire life on this. Professor Choi was moved by her persistence and sincerity. Therefore, in every subsequent surgery, he would call Jung Seok to the front to learn up close. Professor Choi practically gave her everything he knew, and this brilliant student didn't disappoint him either. In less than a year, Jung Seok could perform all surgeries. She originally thought her future would be bright, but what happened next completely destroyed her life. One day the hospital planned to select someone for overseas study. In everyone's view, this person could only be Jung Seok. She was also overjoyed and prepared everything. But when the list was announced, the spot went to a mediocre rich kid instead. Jung Seok's emotions exploded instantly.
Young-ha, why is he going to Boston instead of me?
And that person's mother happened to be on the scene. Unexpectedly, she showed no mercy at all. She also severely scolded this wealthy lady.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you were his mother. Nevertheless, you're also at fault here. This is all thanks to you buying my for your son. You're so educated, but you have no problem stooping that low.
So, Jung, get over yourself.
Why?
What's wrong with you?
What the hell do you expect when you took away what's mine?
Jung Seok's hysterical attitude completely angered Professor Choi, so he suspended all her surgical arrangements. But when Professor Choi returned from a conference, he found Jung Seok had violated regulations and performed surgery on her own. Although Jung Seok explained it was an emergency, she was only trying to save someone, Professor Choi still kicked her out.
This is my surgery! Mine! Let me finish my surgery!
Professor Choi's bias left Jung Seok devastated. Having lost her rationality, she grabbed a nearby IV tube, then strangled Professor Choi's neck from behind. If not for someone stopping her at the scene, Professor Choi would have suffocated to death. The furious Professor Choi slapped Jung Seok in front of everyone. This not only knocked Jung Seok down, but also completely shattered her remaining dignity. However, this wasn't the end. Afterwards, Professor Choi actually stripped Jung Seok of her medical license, making it impossible for her to ever enter an operating room again in this lifetime. For Jung Seok, who was extremely passionate about surgery, this was undoubtedly taking her life. She knelt in the heavy rain, humbly begging, but the cold and heartless Professor Choi didn't want to give her any chance at all. After that day, Jung Seok completely lost everything. She fell into the black market from then on, becoming a second-rate underground surgeon. It was at this time, her life began to completely turn dark. One day, she received a big job. The client set the surgery location in a temple deep in the mountains. Soon after, a tattooed gang boss was carried out of the car. Then, everyone involved in the surgery received a notice. If the patient lives, everyone lives. If the patient dies, everyone dies with him. However, none of this affected Jung Seok, because she was only interested in his brain. The surgery quickly entered a critical phase. The subordinates also gathered tightly outside. If anything unexpected happened, dozens of throwing knives would fly in to take her life. But at this moment, Jung Seok asked her assistant to stop the anesthesia and wake up the patient. The guarding subordinate immediately rushed over.
What do you mean? We have to monitor him to ensure we don't damage the language center of his removing the tumor.
A few seconds later, the gang boss regained consciousness. Jung Seok performed surgery while questioning him about his past. The gang boss, with his skull open, answered fluently. Just as his consciousness reached its most excited state, Jung Seok inserted a long needle, reaching deep into his brain. Then, a chickpea-sized tumor was removed. However, Jung Seok couldn't immediately escape trouble. A nurse actually set her sights on her. She injected an unknown liquid into the gang boss's IV tube. Then she began extorting Jung Seok for practicing without a license.
A doctor without a license, performing brain surgeries outside a hospital.
Money? How much? I'm busy, so get it over with.
3 mil a month? What, too much? Fine, 2 million then.
She showed an extremely greedy smile. Little did she know this was her last moment of pride before entering hell.
Safety. Safety first, always.
Soon the nurse received a text message. Following the address, she came to a simple room covered with plastic sheeting. When she saw those stacks of cash, she immediately excitedly started counting. And the next second, an IV tube tightly strangled her neck. Jung Seok's face once again showed an expression of enjoyment. Perhaps only when killing would her heart feel true happiness. Afterwards, she donated that money to the temple's merit box, because in her view, cleaning up garbage was also a good deed.
Where's the shovel? Is it in the trunk?
Although extremely reluctant in his heart, her assistant ultimately bore all of this silently. The scene returns to the hillside where they were disposing of the body. The meeting between mentor and student wasn't so formal. The two buried the body while catching up. Professor Choi's appearance wasn't without reason. It turned out that after expelling Jung Seok, he developed a brain tumor. He knew that only Jung Seok in this world could save his life. So he began monitoring her every move, practicing without a license, performing surgery for wanted criminals, plus 2 murder cases. This gave Professor Choi enough leverage. This time he came hoping Jung Seok would save his life for old time's sake. Hearing this, Jung Seok found it ridiculous. Now she wanted to kill the professor. How could she possibly save him? But Professor Choi wasn't here to beg. If she didn't accept this request, then everything Jung Seok had done would be made public.
Foolishly strutting around thinking you were smarter than everyone. It was so pathetic, I couldn't help but step in. Got that?
Professor Choi's threat had no effect at all. Under the housekeeper's urging, he could only leave first. Meanwhile, the assistant also successfully avoided police questioning. Thus, the small town finally returned to its previous tranquility. The restaurant sister's face also showed a hint of smile. Jung Seok thought she could continue living happily like this every day. But the next day she received notice that her pharmacy was sealed. Without thinking, she knew who did it. So she angrily called him. Professor Choi didn't hide it. He said if she wanted to unseal the pharmacy, she should come to Busan to find him. Under coercion, the frantic Jung Seok angrily went to Busan. The next day was the most prestigious award ceremony in the global medical field. Professor Choi, who had won 9 consecutive times, naturally became the focus of media attention. Looking at his smug expression, Jung Seok immediately began planning how to deal with him. Coincidentally, when she went to the restroom, she accidentally heard good news that could help her turn the tables. From several people's conversation, she learned the ceremony's host was named Ichida. She was worried about her son's brain tumor surgery, because the child was too young. No one dared to operate on him yet. Only Professor Choi could save this child now. After hearing the reporter's conversation, Jung Seok was excited. She knew the opportunity to bring down Professor Choi had finally come. Soon she knocked on Mrs. Ichida's door. then played a video of her successful surgery cases. Aichida was immediately attracted by her bold plan and technique. She immediately inquired about Jung Seok's price. However, Jung Seok said she didn't want any money. She only wanted Professor Choi to not receive this year's award. She just wanted him to be completely disgraced. But hearing this, Aichida's expression changed instantly. Then she threw Jung Seok out of the room. The next day, unwilling to give up, Jung Seok came to ask for the reason. Aichida said she would never entrust her son to someone who would even go against her own mentor. Jung Seok thought her plan had definitely failed, but unexpectedly that evening, Aichida actively sought her out and agreed to let her operate on her son. Then she boarded Aichida's private jet to Japan. Upon arrival, the operating room was fully prepared. Jung Seok also confidently greeted the young patient. While the surgery was in progress, the award ceremony on the other side also began as scheduled. Initially, the surgery went quite smoothly, but due to an extremely thin blood vessel deep in the brain, an accident still occurred.
バイタルファーテです。ルークで集められる血液はすべて準備してください。はい。スケスマットできるだけたくさん用意してください。はい。出血押されません。頭の装部として ICU に。
At this moment, everyone panicked. When Aichida arrived, she was immediately frightened by the blood all over the floor. In contrast, Jung Seok remained calm in the crisis. Her surgical knife never stopped for a moment, racing against death for every second. Meanwhile, at the award ceremony, the winner was indeed changed as expected. Professor Choi unsurprisingly lost. Just when everyone felt incredulous, he actually took the lead in applauding, breaking the awkward atmosphere. At this time, Jung Seok had already flown back from Japan. She was watching him from a distance with a smug expression. It turned out Jung Seok's surgery was ultimately successful. She rushed back just to see Professor Choi's embarrassment, and couldn't wait to show off her achievements. She expected Professor Choi to be very angry and curse at her, but unexpectedly he was unusually calm at this moment. This made her feel somewhat disappointed instead. She still didn't know to this day. The reason she could successfully perform this surgery was entirely due to Professor Choi's support behind the scenes. It turned out that at the banquet the day before, Aichida asked Professor Choi whether Jung Seok was capable of handling this surgery. Professor Choi knew Jung Seok would work against him, but he still chose to recommend her. He believed his beloved disciple was 100 times better than these fools before him. She never hesitated during surgery. Not once had she failed a case. He pleaded with Aichida to give Jung Seok a chance. Professor Choi's words completely dispelled Aichida's doubts, and Jung Seok's success also made Professor Choi more convinced that only she could perform his surgery. However, what no one expected was, Jung Seok's troubles soon came knocking. Her illegal surgery on the gang boss was still discovered by the police. It turned out there was a black market middleman who had been moving between Jung Seok patients and the police. He made money from both patients and Jung Seok, while selling information to the police to protect himself. The video of Jung Seok's surgery on the gang boss was sold to the police by him. The police took the video to Professor Choi, hoping he could help identify this doctor. Professor Choi immediately recognized this as Jung Seok's work, but for the sake of his own surgery, he didn't betray Jung Seok. However, the police still found the surgery location through other channels. As an old friend, Kim also called Professor Choi to investigate together. Although the scene had been cleaned thoroughly, the police dog with its keen sense of smell still found something wrong in the back mountain. The police immediately dug up that loose patch of ground. A corpse tightly wrapped in plastic sheeting appeared before everyone. That was the body of the greedy nurse. It seemed this wasn't just about illegal medical practice anymore. At this moment, Professor Choi also immediately realized things might be exposed. But what he never expected was, the next day, Jung Seok actually appeared at the crime scene. She even casually played with the police dog nearby. The police curiously asked why the police dog didn't bite her.
She owns dogs. She has quite a few.
Makes sense. What kinds of dogs?
Rottweilers.
Rottweilers? Aren't they really aggressive?
They're absolute sweethearts.
But at this moment, this young policeman didn't know. He too would soon lose his life because of these few words. So not long after, his suspicion ultimately aroused Jung Seok's murderous intent. Professor Choi scolded her for killing people everywhere like a madwoman. Jung Seok thought Professor Choi was opposing her because of the award incident. The two parted on bad terms, but their meeting was still seen by Captain Liang. He recognized this girl as Professor Choi's student. The case soon made new progress. During the autopsy, the forensic examiner actually found dog hair on the nurse's clothes. The deceased didn't own a dog. Most likely this was left by the killer. But the young policeman carelessly told Professor Choi about this. As a result, the young policeman was asked out by Professor Choi that evening. He had previously stuck something on the door handle, and took the opportunity to hand him a handkerchief. At this moment, the young policeman still voiced his doubts.
It's about your student I met the other day, that woman.
Seok?
Yeah. Remember the animal fur we found on the victim's clothes? Well, we got an email from the NFS earlier, and it turned out to be Rottweiler fur. The victim didn't own any dogs, so I guess it came from the killer. But a brain surgeon who owns a Rottweiler probably isn't very common, wouldn't you think?
Agreed.
As soon as Professor Choi finished speaking, the young policeman lost consciousness. At this moment, Professor Choi's true face was finally revealed. In fact, he was secretly a demon more vicious than Jung Seok. It turned out this wasn't his first time killing. Once he wanted to use surgery as an opportunity to kill a classmate he disliked. But Jung Se-ok saw through it. Jung Se-ok didn't want to see her mentor's medical career have any blemishes, so she took the opportunity to cut his hand. Then Jung Se-ok successfully saved that old classmate with her own surgical skills. Jung Se-ok wanted to claim credit, but unexpectedly Professor Choi developed a grudge against her because of this incident. Being seen attempting murder by his student made him feel he had lost face completely, so he tried every way to drive Jung Se-ok away, and that detested classmate still didn't escape his fate in the end. After discharge, he was killed by Professor Choi with a knife to the throat. The movement was even cleaner and more efficient than Jung Se-ok's. The old classmate fled down from the car in disbelief, then accidentally fell off a cliff. Professor Choi just watched him expressionlessly. Eventually, the body was completely devoured by wild dogs. Everything was done seamlessly. Rather than saying he was Jung Se-ok's teacher, it was more accurate to say Jung Se-ok was a mirror reflecting him. In his youth, he was just like Jung Se-ok. His research on human brains reached obsessive levels. Whenever he saw the bloody brain matter, his face was filled with uncontrollable excitement. So when he saw Jung Se-ok, it was like seeing his younger self. His insistence on driving Jung Se-ok away was actually his inability to face himself. Soon, the policeman's disappearance caught Captain Yang's attention. He investigated the policeman's call records, found that the last person he spoke with was Professor Choi. Yang asked Professor Choi out, questioning whether he had seen that young policeman that night. Professor Choi said they had indeed talked about meeting, but later he had something come up and canceled the appointment. At this time, a colleague from the police station called. After investigation, Professor Choi had been home all evening. It turned out the housekeeper heard shower sounds in the bathroom when delivering dinner, so he mistakenly thought Professor Choi had been home all along. In fact, Professor Choi had already left through a secret door and drove away in that luxury car used to kill his old classmate. His mind was meticulous, his plans thorough. He wouldn't leave any clues for the police. But now there was still one person who could threaten Jung Se-ok. That was the wavering black market middleman. So Professor Choi called him. Sure enough, the black middleman had guessed about the nurse's death.
Yeah, I know about your precious student. You're still looking for that crazy girl. I've agreed to meet with Liang later. I bet you're a little, huh?
We should meet first.
I'll think about it.
Professor Choi offered a huge reward and proposed a meeting. Unable to resist the temptation, he soon came to the door. Professor Choi said he had a major client needing secret surgery. He hoped he could find Jung Se-ok to assist him. The payment was 10 times that of the last surgery. He was indeed tempted. When Yang called asking to meet, he deliberately put him off. Obviously, he temporarily sided with Professor Choi again. To completely clear Jung Se-ok of suspicion, Professor Choi actually set fire to her doghouse. 3 poor Rottweilers also turned to ash. He didn't know those 3 dogs were Jung Se-ok's most beloved. The unknowing Jung Se-ok was completely enraged. She immediately called Professor Choi out. Then she drove her pickup truck directly into Professor Choi's luxury car. But she wasn't satisfied yet. After backing the car out, she stepped on the gas and crashed hard into him again. Unexpectedly, Professor Choi slowly got out of the car at this moment and calmly lit a cigarette. The assistant nearby kept trying to persuade Jung Se-ok, but she was already blinded by hatred at this point. Looking at this mortal enemy, she floored the accelerator and rushed forward once more. But ultimately, she still couldn't bring herself to do it. Afterwards, Jung Se-ok was immersed in the pain of losing her dogs. Born to be strong, she cried for the first time. But just at this moment, the black middleman actually came to her door, proposing that there was a surgery for her to participate in, with generous compensation. But Jung Se-ok had already heard about his two-faced nature. She didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore. But coincidentally, Jung Se-ok's university loan shark debt was borrowed from him. Now the high interest had turned the debt into 100 million won. Whether to do it or not was completely out of her control now. She just didn't know that the doctor she would work with was Professor Choi. It was too late to regret now. Soon after, they were arranged on a giant cruise ship. The surgery location was set on the high seas far from Korea, because the patient's identity was the supreme leader of a famous cult, so all actions were strictly confidential. As the ship sailed farther and farther away, Jung Se-ok reluctantly threw her dog's collar into the ocean. At this time, Professor Choi also inappropriately walked over. Jung Se-ok didn't understand. He wasn't short of money, so why would he come to do this kind of degrading surgery? Unexpectedly, the professor came to mock her.
Given how full of yourself you are these days, I was a little curious. I thought I might as well see it firsthand. Your criminal lifestyle.
What are you talking about?
Are you still angry about the dogs? I told you the authorities were onto you. That was a careless mistake you made. That's why I took care of your mess. So be grateful.
I'm all away somewhere, you know. But you burned them alive.
It was just a few dogs.
Professor Choi's ruthlessness and coldness once again ignited her anger. She grabbed a nearby umbrella and swung it at Professor Choi. Professor Choi was beaten without any ability to fight back. Fortunately, the assistant appeared in time to stop everything. Jung Se-ok had vented her anger, but for Professor Choi's weak body, this was undoubtedly adding insult to injury. To ensure the surgery could proceed smoothly, he injected the last bottle of life-saving medicine into his body. However, during the surgery, his hand still trembled involuntarily. Fortunately, no major disaster occurred, otherwise everyone would be thrown into the sea to feed the fish. Jung Se-ok noticed the problem. She suggested switching positions, but how could the always proud Professor Choi admit defeat in front of his student? He still endured the pain and insisted on operating himself. But strangely, he who was usually serious and unsmiling actually started chatting with Jung Se-ok today.
That's why no one likes you. Doctor, let me ask you, what do you think your problem is?
I have to say, I never heard you talk so much, Dr. Choi.
Completely selfish and ungrateful as well.
And who exactly am I supposed to be grateful to?
You didn't know that, did you? Those times when we worked together were the most exciting and fulfilling moments of my life. So of course I'm grateful to you. Very much so. I never realized that teaching could be so exciting until you came along. I didn't even think it was possible.
Jung Se-ok had never heard such words from his mouth, nor had she ever received positive recognition from him. This mentor before her was both familiar and strange. After the surgery ended, she followed him. Professor Choi admitted he hadn't been this happy in a long time.
Just say it. It's no secret you hate me.
I don't hate you. It's the other way around.
Jung Se-ok hesitated for a long time, finally opened her heart to him as well.
Back then, working with you at the hospital, I felt the same way.
Jung Se-ok kept talking about the beauty of those times. The mentor and student also completely opened their hearts at this moment. Like a father and daughter who hadn't seen each other for years sharing their feelings, Jung Se-ok bowed deeply to her teacher for the first time. In an instant, all the grudges from the past 5 years dissipated. But what Jung Se-ok didn't know was, this seemingly cold teacher actually cared for her the most. Professor Choi would smile whenever he saw her photos, and Professor Choi's first murder was actually also for Jung Se-ok. At that time, his old classmate was interested in Jung Se-ok's superb medical skills. He wanted to take her away through overseas study, and tried to turn her into a money-making tool. But Professor Choi knew, girls taken away by him either went crazy or disappeared. How could he let this scumbag take away his beloved student? So at that time he cancelled Jung Se-ok's overseas quota, actually to protect her, and later he still killed the old classmate, because the other party still didn't give up pestering Jung Se-ok. From that time on, Professor Choi decided to protect Jung Se-ok with his life. However, as soon as they got off the ship, the black middleman changed his mind again. He decided to hand Jung Se-ok over to the police for another reward, but the sharp Jung Se-ok still discovered this. Taking advantage of the distraction, she escaped from the black middleman's sight. After he met with the police, he found that Jung Se-ok was gone.
Shit, where'd you go?
Mr. Mean,
Holy. Hey, I was looking for you just now. Where were you?
before we sit down, I wanted to have a little talk. Let's go somewhere quiet.
People who often kill know. Once someone says these words, it means she has already developed murderous intent. The clueless black middleman quickly signaled the police behind him to follow. But at this time, Jung Se-ok received a call from a former colleague. The other party told her Professor Choi's brain cancer had already reached the terminal stage. If he didn't have surgery soon, he probably wouldn't live more than a month. Before Jung Se-ok could react, a familiar figure brushed past her. She quickly turned to look. She found the black middleman could no longer straighten his back. Professor Choi was supporting him with effort, looking at the blood on the ground, and the two figures slowly disappearing. At this moment, Jung Se-ok finally understood. The Professor Choi she had always hated the most had actually been secretly protecting her all along. Seeing the police approaching step by step, the assistant quickly pulled Jung Se-ok away. Then she received a message from Professor Choi. When she arrived at the designated location, she found Professor Choi had already prepared a car and a large amount of cash for her, hoping she could leave here as soon as possible and hide as far away as possible. But at this moment, Jung Se-ok had already put life and death aside. She decided to stay and save Professor Choi. On the other side, the black middleman's death caused a huge sensation, because his manner of death was truly remarkable. The killer used a thin surgical knife, precisely pierced between his ribs into the spleen, causing internal abdominal bleeding. This wouldn't make the victim immediately bleed everywhere, nor would excessive blood loss cause immediate unconsciousness.
The victim would have to be conscious enough to walk, whether on their own or with help.
You can handle a few more steps.
The surveillance footage only captured the killer's back, so everyone prepared to start checking one by one. But at this time, Yang became troubled. Actually, he had already clearly seen. That person was Professor Choi. He just didn't reveal this matter.
Why did you kill Mean that day? Then there's all those black market surgeries. I just can't figure it out. Why? Huh? A prestigious brain surgeon like yourself.
What do you even say?
The black market doctor that Mean was going to turn in that day, that was you. You killed him in cold blood. Warner's dead, isn't he?
After hearing these words, Professor Choi couldn't help but laugh.
Young. Everything's out in the open now. What shall we do? I know I could handle it. But you'd be leaving your family behind.
It turned out Yang also had leverage in Professor Choi's hands. He often tampered with evidence and took bribes from suspects. If these things were exposed, his life would probably be over, but experience comes with age. After returning, Yang began repeatedly watching the surveillance video. He finally discovered Jung Se-ok's figure at the scene. At this time, he seemed to understand something.
You're his weakness, his Achilles heel. Why would Toki Choi start doing black market surgery out of nowhere? For what reason? But you didn't have nearly as many options, did you? To turn into us that day, it was you. You were that doctor.
Jeez. What are you even saying?
I'm saying you're the reason that Toki's a killer. The reason he killed me. Don't you understand?
You can say that all you want, but that's crazy. Come on. Wait, I thought I was a stalker, wasn't I?
If you really were his stalker, then at Gwangyok Temple, he wouldn't have just let you go like that. Or do you think I'm blind? I've known him my whole life. And so as busy as he was, he still made time for you, right? Don't you understand?
What does it mean then?
See that guy? He's not the type to take shit from anyone. Yet he puts up with you, huh? It means you're his weakness. Crazy piece of work. Huh. I know the real truth. He's the actual psycho.
Now Yang had figured out the cause and effect, but unfortunately, he had no evidence. He could only release Jung Se-ok first. However, the fact that Jung Se-ok was being watched still reached Professor Choi's knowledge. A murderous aura instantly surged in his heart. That night, he asked Yang to meet at his secret warehouse. A conspicuous refrigerator sat prominently in the middle. Yang opened it to look. It turned out to contain the young policeman everyone had been desperately searching for. At this time, Professor Choi also slowly walked out from the darkness. He not only admitted to killing the young policeman and the black middleman, he even claimed the nurse was also his doing. Moreover, he also took responsibility for the illegal surgery. Professor Choi told Yang, hospital work was really too boring. Killing was just to seek more excitement.
What do you want?
You're going to keep investigating. Then you catch me.
On the other side, Jung Se-ok had already found an operating room for Professor Choi and told him the specific surgery time. But on the day of surgery, Professor Choi never showed up. Instead, he sent a friend to inform her the surgery would be performed a month later. Jung Se-ok knew that would be his death sentence. By then, no one would be able to save him. However, this was exactly what Professor Choi wanted. He wanted his condition to deteriorate before the surgery, because he wanted to leave his life on the operating table. Actually, before he sought out Jung Se-ok, he already knew this was a surgery with zero chance of success. His insistence on having Jung Se-ok as his lead surgeon was actually wanting to use his own death to give this beloved student one last lesson. That was to learn to accept failure, because Jung Se-ok had never failed in her professional career. Continuing like this would cause her to stagnate. Jung Se-ok was the concern he couldn't let go of in this lifetime. On the other side, Jung Se-ok began frantically searching the world for Professor Choi. But Professor Choi had already cut off contact. He hid in a place no one could find. Soon the police issued a wanted notice. Professor Choi quickly became a murderer, despised by everyone. Jung Se-ok didn't know what had happened, but time was running out. She could only ask the gang boss to help her find Professor Choi. The other party used all his connections. Sure enough, he found Professor Choi's location. Jung Se-ok didn't go directly. She asked the gang boss to bring Professor Choi back. She secretly asked Yang out. Yang was also an honest person. He told her everything about his dealings with Professor Choi. It turned out that night in the warehouse, the two had reached an agreement. Professor Choi promised not to expose Yang's dirty deeds, but the condition was to take all crimes upon himself. From then on, he would give Jung Se-ok a way out.
That way the cases won't get dropped right away. Not until he dies, at least. Just let him die.
That was your deal. I didn't agree to it. Not gonna die.
Dr. Toki Choi has to die, so I can live.
Now what are you gonna do? What if I walk down to the police station and talk all about the deal the two of you?
Jung Se-ok's sudden threat put Yang in a difficult position, but just as Jung Se-ok was about to leave, he actually drove straight into her. He dragged Jung Se-ok out of the car, then stomped hard on her hand. After being dodged by Jung Se-ok, he tried to break her fingers. He wanted to make Jung Se-ok unable to operate on Professor Choi. At this critical moment, the savior-like assistant appeared again. He struggled to crawl out of the car to protect Jung Se-ok, but Yang went crazy and vented his anger on him. Listening to the savior's screams, Jung Se-ok's eyes gradually became fierce. Then she pulled out her favorite knife and stabbed it into Yang's foot, then grabbed his collar for another stab. Clean and efficient kill. No one could stop her from saving Professor Choi. She would kill anyone who stood in her way. Then Jung Se-ok called the gang boss.
You're with Dr. Choi right now, yeah? Put him on the damn phone. You know Inspector Young, right? Your good buddy.
You...
I'm with him right now. Although he can't really come to the phone. So now are you gonna come see me? Can't you see? This is all because you ran away and drove me freaking crazy!
Professor Choi immediately had a bad feeling. He could only temporarily abandon his plan, and hurriedly rushed to the scene, looking at the trunk seeping with blood, and the assistant cowering behind the car. Professor Choi knew it was all too late.
You're sleeping? What the hell were you thinking, killing the cop? I told you I'd have the surgery, didn't I? But you just had to be impatient and ruin things.
Pathetic. You thought I wouldn't be able to find you if you ran? Screw this stupid lesson, I don't want any of this!
Wipe your face right now. Can you take care of this by yourself?
No. I'm gonna need you to help me.
At this moment, both finally let down their guard against each other, and honestly showed their most vulnerable sides to each other. Jung Se-ok didn't want anything. She only hoped Professor Choi could live well. But Professor Choi still insisted on having surgery a month later.
Then why are you doing all this?
I need to give you all I can before I die. No matter how hard I try, I can't think of how else to do that.
I already told you. You've already given me more than enough. Let's go! Come with me!
No!
If you want to live, we have to go now!
Listen to me for once in your life!
Let's go!
You idiot! If you take another step towards me, then you can forget about the surgery.
What?
Jung Se-ok couldn't convince Professor Choi. She could only watch helplessly as he left her. Even so, Professor Choi didn't forget to drive away Yang's car, one last time helping her clean up everything. A month later, the two met as agreed in the operating room. At this time, Professor Choi was already terminally ill. He wanted to say final goodbye to Jung Se-ok, but Jung Se-ok refused.
You can thank me then. See you after the surgery, Doctor.
Time quickly passed, and a year went by. Jung Se-ok still engaged in underground illegal surgery work, but unlike before, from now on she was no longer fighting alone, because a once very proud person also joined this bottom-tier circle he once looked down upon. At the end of the story, Jung Se-ok's dogs didn't actually die. They were entrusted to a friend's care by Professor Choi, because what Jung Se-ok treasured as precious was also his treasure.